Okay, so what if you could fix a nagging health issue? I mean, permanently fix it. Not with some pill, but by literally rewriting your own genetic code. And what if you could do it all by yourself with tools you just bought online for a few $100? Yeah, we're gonna dive into this because we are talking about the wild, kind of unregulated world of DIY biohacking, where the very code of life is basically becoming open source.
And you know what? It all starts with a goal that is just so relatable. This right here was the motivation behind one of the most ambitious and, let's be real, controversial biohacking experiments ever put online. And it wasn't driven by some grand scientific ambition. Nope, it was driven by the simple, profound desire for a good slice of pizza.
You heard that right. A YouTuber decided he was just done. Done with the pills, done with the restrictions. His plan was to engineer a virus in a friend's lab, load it up with a gene for digesting milk sugar, and then just take it himself. And he recorded the whole thing, aiming to rewrite his own DNA. For good.
So, what would push someone to do that? To become a human guinea pig in their own genetic experiment? Well, to get that, we've got to look at the problem he was so desperate to solve, and the, let's just say, revolutionary and very risky tech he decided to use. I mean, look, this isn't some rare thing. We're talking about a huge chunk of the world's population who can't properly digest lactose. For most people, it's an inconvenience. But for others, like the guy in our story, it can be seriously debilitating. So you can kind of see why a permanent fix would start to sound really tempting. Okay, so the tech at the heart of his whole plan, it's called gene therapy. And the core idea is, honestly, surprisingly straightforward. If your body is missing the genetic instructions to make a key protein, like, say, the lactase enzyme that lets you digest milk, you just deliver a working copy of those instructions right into your cells. And to do that, his plan was to use a modified, supposedly harmless virus as like a biological delivery truck to carry that new gene exactly where it needed to go.
But here's the thing. This story isn't really just about one guy. It's about a much bigger trend. It's about how shockingly accessible these tools have become. Tools that used to be locked away in multi-million-dollar research labs. Gene editing is literally leaving the lab and moving into the garage.
So, how accessible are we talking? Get this. One company sells its kits to schools and, just regular people at home for as little as $2 per experiment. $2. For $2, you can get the tools to edit the actual code of life. It's wild.
And it's not just some random outlier either. A whole cottage industry has popped up online. You've got companies selling these all-in-one kits for under $500, and they're marketing them directly to hobbyists and students, basically promising that gene editing can be as easy as following a recipe.
So how does this whole CRISPR thing actually work? Well, it's usually broken down into 3 key parts. First, you've got the Cas9 protein. Think of this as your molecular scissors. They do the cutting. Then you have guide RNA, or gRNA. This is like a tiny GPS that tells those scissors exactly where in the DNA to cut. And finally, you have the template DNA. That's the replacement code, the new piece of information the cell uses to patch things up after the cut.
Okay, so we've got the kits, we've got the basic science, but what does one of these experiments actually look like, on your kitchen counter? The process has been simplified so much that it feels less like hardcore science and more like, well, following a recipe. Right, so for a simple experiment, say on some bacteria, it really just boils down to a few steps. First, you grow some bacteria, like E. coli. Then, you treat them with chemicals to make their cell walls a little bit leaky. After that, you mix in all your CRISPR parts, the scissors, the GPS, and then, this is the really cool part, you do something called a heat shock to basically force all that new DNA inside the cells. Finally, you just let them grow and see if it worked. It's incredibly complex science, but it's been distilled down into this simple procedure.
So our biohacker posts his video online. Super proud of what he's done. But the reaction from the actual scientific community, it was not applause. No, it was a tidal wave of pure alarm.
This comment from a genetic engineer on Reddit really just cuts right to the chase. It gets to the absolute biggest fear here. See, the virus he used is supposed to put the new gene in a safe spot, but it can go rogue and insert itself randomly. And if that random spot happens to be inside a gene that, say, stops tumors from growing, well, you're literally gambling with giving yourself cancer.
Then a neuroscientist jumped in, pointing out another massive problem: all the unknowns. I mean, what are the long-term effects? What was the actual dose he even took? He was using non-human proteins. How's his immune system going to react to that down the line?
The whole experiment was just a total shot in the dark, with absolutely zero thought about the consequences. And this quote from a cancer lab researcher just perfectly sums up the whole vibe. It captures this bizarre mix of being kind of impressed by the sheer nerve of it all, and at the same time, being completely horrified by how reckless the science was.
And look, these weren't just vague complaints. The experts had a whole laundry list of specific, really severe risks. You've got the huge cancer risk we talked about, the potential for a massive, and I mean devastating, autoimmune reaction, the fact that nobody knows if his homemade dose was toxic, and of course, the massive dangers of doing all this without proper sterile technique.
Okay, so this kind of stuff doesn't just happen in the court of scientific opinion, right? It happens in the real world. A world where regulators have a very, very clear and serious opinion on all this.
Yeah, beyond what the scientists think, there's the actual law. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, they've seen this DIY trend growing. And trust me, they have a very clear and, well, let's just say unmistakable stance on it.
And there you have it. The FDA is crystal clear. Selling these products for people to use on themselves is against the law, full stop. They're not just concerned. They've flat out said these are illegal, unapproved products with major safety risks. End of story.
So the story of our lactose-intolerant biohacker, and for the record, he claims his experiment actually worked, it leaves us with this huge, kind of unsettling question. The tools to edit the code of life, they're getting cheaper, they're getting easier, they're getting into everyone's hands, which raises the fundamental question for all of us, really. As this incredible power leaves the lab and comes to the people, who is in control of our code?